In the past 2 millennia, humanity really gained a lot. Gone are the days where being born carried a significant chance of dying. Starvation is a thing of the past, as any food your heart desires is available year-round and at reasonable prices. And today you can see more titties with a click of a button than an ancient emperor would have seen in a lifetime. But we did lose one thing, that is racism. Now before you go furiously masturbating in the comments that racism is alive and well today, that's not what I mean. What I mean is that modern racism tries way too hard to be scientific. Oh, your complexion is slightly darker, the angle of your nose is 3 degrees too steep, and your cranium is slightly more oval than mine? Well, that obviously means you're scum barely deserving the title of human. Honestly, Darwin might have been a hero in the field of biology, but his discoveries completely ruined the field of racism. Because racism didn't always have this, ooh, natural selection means that white people are better for some reason, air of pseudo-scientific retardation around it. That's a relatively new idea. No, in a simpler time, long before Darwin, it was, well, still quite bad, but at least it was funnier. The ancient Greeks, apart from inventing sex, walls that don't block the wind, and the concept of thinking about stuff, also had a pretty interesting theory on why they were the perfect human specimen, and everybody else was subhuman scum deserving of subjugation. And no subhuman scum was more deserving of subjugation than the Persians. You see, ancient Greek ethnocentrism only really emerged during their 50 years of conflict with the Persian Empire in the 5th century BC, when a coalition of Greek city-states ultimately defeated what was at that time the largest empire in existence. How the hell did the Greeks pull this off? Was it because the Persians were fighting in hostile foreign lands while the Greeks were fighting on home turf, allowing for battles like the Battle of Thermopylae, where a very small number of Spartan and Thespian soldiers managed to hold off the Persian army despite being outnumbered 30-1? Or was it because the Greeks used the size of the Persian navy against itself, winning a decisive naval victory in the Battle of Salamis? Or maybe because near the end of the war, the Persian Empire suffered from internal revolts that required military intervention? Well, obviously it was none of that. The real reason Persia lost was because the Persians had thin blood, making them inherently inferior to Greeks. You see, the Greeks believed that the hot and dry climate of the Middle East caused the Persians to have thinner blood compared to them. This not only made their complexion darker, it also made them more decadent, more frail, more effeminate, and apparently also horny as hell, explaining why there were so fucking many of them invading Greece. Conversely, the Greeks believed colder climates in the north caused people to have thick blood. This not only made them taller, whiter and stronger, but also incredibly stupid, sluggish, and honestly almost beast-like. And guess what's right in the middle of the thick-blooded brutes of the north and the thin-blooded pussies of the south? Surprise, surprise, it's Greece, where the people had normal blood, which meant they had the intelligence and refined nature of the thin-blooded people in the south, while also having the ruggedness and strength of the people in the north. About 100 years later, the famous philosopher Aristotle would add a second dimension to this Greek idea of superiority. His theory of natural slavery stated that some people, aka non-Greeks, were just inherently slave-like and therefore deserved to be subjugated by the people who weren't. Now, I'm 95% sure the Greeks were well aware of the fact they were just spouting absolute bullshit with their blood thickness theory, but simply didn't care. This is because, well, as far as hypotheses go, this one's fairly easy to verify, especially for the famously scientifically inclined Greeks. Just get some people from the north, some people from the south, and some Greek people, collect blood samples, and then compare their viscosity. Bada boom bada beam, theory disproven. To no one's surprise, the knockoff Greeks over on the Italian peninsula also had their fair share of racism. But it was slightly different compared to Greece's version. You see, Rome copied basically everything from Greece and modified it to fit their own needs. I.e., the Greeks invented sex, so the Romans invented a version that included women. Greeks invented walls that don't block the wind, so the Romans used it fucking everywhere. The Greeks invented the concept of thinking about stuff, and the Romans considered it frivolous bullshit, instead conquering most of the known world with sheer autistic determination. So yeah, Rome's flavor of racism was in many ways very similar to Greece's, being based on cultural superiority and to a lesser extent, environmental factors. You know, barbarians in the north, pussies in the south. But modified to fit Rome's needs by moving the goalposts about 1,000 kilometers northwest. The main reason for this was, well, if they had kept the Greek definitions, they would have had to consider themselves thick-blooded barbarians, which was something they were very insecure about, and not without reason. After the Roman conquest of Greece, many of the Roman elite were shocked to find out that their newly acquired Greek slaves were way more cultured and better educated than they were. It's really not a stretch to say that, yes, on a military level, Rome was undoubtedly superior to Greece. But on a cultural level, it was Greece that held dominance. After all, it was Greek. not Latin, that was the common tongue throughout most of the empire. There really was no denying Greece's cultural superiority, but the Romans still wanted to see themselves as superior, so they just started shitting on Greeks for not having their priorities in order. The Romans considered the Greeks to be effeminate soy boys who were too busy making art, music and thinking about stuff, instead of doing what's important, which is why they were rightfully conquered by Rome. Sure, Greek plays, music and philosophy might be fun and interesting pastimes, but they're just that, pastimes. Meanwhile, it's Rome's ingenuity that delivers fresh lead-poisoned water to millions through aqueducts. It's Rome's tenacity that allowed the empire to spread as far as it did, and it's Rome's determination that built a wall more than 70 miles in length. So while Greece is an undeniable cultural powerhouse, it's also nothing more than a bunch of weak-bodied nerds circle-jerking in the streets of Athens. Despite considering themselves superior to Greeks, the Romans also desperately wanted to be Greek, or at least Greek descendant, because compared to Greece, Rome was relatively new, and the Romans hated the idea of just being some upstart empire, especially when other powers like Persia and Egypt were centuries or even millennia older than they were. This is why Rome's origin myth deliberately states that the founders of Rome, Romulus and Remus, descended not only from the Roman god Mars, but also from the Greek hero Aeneas. Those things aside, the Romans were many things, but they weren't racist based on skin color. In fact, sources suggest that the Romans actually cared little about the color of one's skin. No, the Romans were racist based on culture. It really didn't matter how white you were. If you shaved, spoke Latin and wore a toga instead of pants, the Romans would instantly consider you to be more Roman than a stereotypical Italian with a beard who's wearing pants. This also meant that Roman slavery wasn't racial at all. It was more just based on whichever direction the empire's frontiers were expanding to at the time, or wherever your local dealer managed to kidnap an unaccompanied child. Likewise, positions of power weren't exclusively for people we would nowadays consider Italian. For example, one of Emperor Trajan's favorite generals was originally a Berber tribesman from what is now southern Algeria, or the famous orator Herodotus Atticus, who adopted a boy from what is now modern-day Sudan, a boy that would later on also become a very well-respected scholar. Of course, all of this didn't mean Rome wasn't extremely prejudiced in other ways. They were sexist to the point it would make even the most chronically online misogynist blush, and were, as the Jews found out, willing to murder to death anyone who refused to worship the emperor as a god. Around the year 33, the Romans also brutally executed a Jewish guy named Jesus. But for some reason he wouldn't stay dead, instead laying the groundwork for an entirely new type of racism. Racism based on religion. Something I'll discuss in the next video, which is going to be on racism in the Middle Ages. And with that, I want to thank you for watching. Don't forget to like, subscribe en hoi mam, ik weet dat je mijn video's kijkt. Hoop dat je hem leuk vond. Kusjes.